Yeah, I guess. Can you hear me? I'm here. Yeah, I guess. Can you hear me? I'm here.
fall down. Almost fell.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Hey, Kayla? Can you come up and try to help me with something? Can you try to help me with something? I can't get this, what do you call it? Can't get the sound to work.
Okay.
Where?
Speaker. Okay. Click on like that. Okay, so the sound's working on the
Right.
computer.
I wonder if they don't have their sound turned on.
Can you make that big?
I can't get my own video to work. It's like,
Do you want to be on video?
I don't necessarily, but
Can you move the mouse around a little bit so you get your options here? What is the,
this,
yeah,
should I leave the computer on?
no, do speakers, Realtek audio.
Okay,
Because that should be playing out of your.
yeah. I mean, and I think they might have it on their end. Maybe it's muted.
Sorry for your trouble. I'm scared. Wait, is it as bad as it sounded?
So
would you
the
feel
reason I
comfortable
have not,
riding it?
I have not gotten a bike yet is because I don't like the idea of biking on Higas or Payne, because Payne is. Higas has a wider shoulder, but cars are whizzing by you at 45 supposed speed limit. And Payne. So.
Be able to cut through the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, through, so I get to run through there right now, but I have a half a mile run on Higas, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
Just to get over that. But yeah, once I can get there, then it is I don't have to go down to Route 1, which is awesome. It's going through there is very nice, and then I get to come through the park and all that over here.
Yeah, I mean, we have, I bet when we look at it, there's actually several really great sort of off-road or off busy road connections that that we have right now, or that we could have, low-hanging fruit, or that we have and we could improve.
For instance,
you know,
having
in
a
a way.
light switch, if.
Yeah.
If there isn't one and it's a good connector route, you've got a way to get across one.
I really do like the idea of a concept corner topic potentially on this, where again, maybe we can make it bigger, more about like what are solutions to the traffic challenge in Scarborough, and I think you've mentioned the three things: walk, bike, or head bike, and transit, and just like have an open conversation about what is it that people would be interested in seeing, and we can dig in specifically to the bike piece. Because again, I do think, well, maybe this as an infrastructure project might not be the biggest priority. I view it as a solution to the biggest priority, right? Which
One
prioritize.
solution.
Yeah, one.
Yeah, I'd be super curious to hear that conversation about, because I think, and maybe framing it becomes really important, that, not everyone might relate to biking or even walking as a form of transportation, but like everybody walks at some point, even if it's just for a short distance. And you may also bike ride for fun. You may not, or for exercise, you may not equate that with transportation, but the facilities are the same, right? So like providing for, no matter why you're biking, you're still biking. And some of the destinations may change or the routes may be a little bit different, but yeah, I'd be really interested to hear more about that. And I feel like it would be remiss not to mention the soon hopefully connection along the Eastern Trail itself. And when what you're seeing on the portion of continuous trail that's there now, I continue to feel like this is a total gem for Scarborough. And if I had a business in Oak Hill, man, I would be putting my bike rack front and center. I would be putting a little sign down at the Eastern Trail crossing that's like sandwiches and coffee this way, or because
Except
how.
for the sign ordinance.
There's gonna be a protected route all the way to Portland at that point, like that's
Yes.
very
For some.
comfortable
Complete
ride.
off-road, exactly. And so how fun is it to, it's fun to be able to ride off-road, but, it's super fun to be able to do that. And like if you live in Portland, to like come to bike to the beach maybe, or to bike for a couple miles and grab something to eat and then turn around and go back, vice versa. So anyway, using that, I think, a mapping exercise or routing exercise in this type of forum would be really great to collect public input on that. Like, hey, here's a highlighter, like here's, it's orange if you're feeling unsafe, and it's green if you like riding here or whatever. And that would maybe help provide a little context.
Ski trails.
Sure.
Black diamond. Yeah, one is a black diamond.
Route one is the black diamond.
Not, no pun intended, but we also don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Google has maps that does this. And it could be something, as fairly straightforward as, connecting the dots behind the scenes so that the town's priority bike routes are communicated to that platform in a way that's available to everyone, whether you live here or not, whether you think to check the website or not. But if you were planning a trip or a route, those would pop up in a different color for you than if you were on road.
And one of the things this committee talked about a ways back, when we actually, this committee developed the complete street policy, is we even talked about taking snapshots. I think we talked about 3 or 4 different, here's a typical cross sections of a roadway, and trying to figure out where that might land. That was around the complete streets. We never, I think, developed, but that again, with the next topic, which is the transportation study, there's all these little pieces and keys that I think this committee has touched on or has brainstormed on or has, has planted that seed, I think, that should be part of maybe the scope of this larger transportation study.
For sure. And any, any forums like this that you're talking about, John, or the public survey, any of that outreach, like you can't, any of that information that can be provided to someone that's helping the town with this study is just going to be better, because otherwise it's just a company from, Milwaukee coming in and like giving us a report. But, a good company would come in and be like, I need to hear from your, your community. And so the more information that we can provide to that end, it's got to be, and particularly over time, I would imagine. They're going to come in under a specific scope and a time frame, but we can say, we have survey information going back 5 years that says this is really a need for this community, and we haven't really been able to address it holistically. I was working on that. That was really helpful.
Okay. And I guess I am going to ask that maybe we bring back, I know we've talked for over an hour on bike racks. It's just a lot of good information, but I still feel like I probably need to circle back and we need to put that on another agenda, just because I know we touched briefly with funding, saying doing grassroots kind of thing. I think that's going to take a big commitment and time for this committee to actually get in, because staff doesn't have a whole lot of time right now. So it would be looking towards everybody sitting around this table as how you develop that in program and get people actually to come out and do that. Or we can talk about also some of the other funding pieces, and we will continue to look for grants as well for staff. Plus, we'll also need to start talking about prioritizing as we talked about that. So I think it's going to be future meetings, because I think we probably talked.
How much is in the reserve accounts for rec and multimodal? Is there a lot in there?
My understanding anecdotally, throw out there, talking with Todd Sousa today, I think he threw out like 100,000 rec.
Okay.
That's something that, again, he my understanding, the process would be, a developer comes in. We have an example of Leighton Farm. And each lot has to pay $500 rec fee. So if you think about subdivision town, everybody's paying each lot into this fund. I think Todd, then when we could get our direction thoughts, start looking at projects, he brings it to Tom to then take to council. So council has to authorize that money to be spent. Similarly for multimodal, part of the things we're looking at with multimodal is where we close the gap on sidewalk gaps. And I think Oak Hill is a good example of where from Ward Street up to Amato's on that side of the road is a gap kind of thing that we could look at. Money to fill that, but that would be a request that I assume would be during budget process that would have to go in front of council to allocate those funds.
I just don't think in the 2 years I've been on that we use those accounts.
Yeah.
So
So I think that's why the rec is so high. Multimodal, I'm thinking is not as high because that is a new program, and it's essentially when planning board is not required sidewalk, but saying this doesn't make sense here because we want to use it elsewhere to close gaps and build out from the center of town. And I'm just taking a stab in the dark, but I would say it's probably 50 to 100,000. So I think it's closer to 50, to be honest. And that's only because places like Piper Shore put in a big chunk, or the Beacon put in a big chunk, instead of putting up a bus shelter, those type of things. So there's a couple that kind of bumped it up, where everyone else is just kind of like rec fee. It's just kind of a little at a time building. That makes sense. So anyways, I just want to warn you guys then, if you're like, oh, she's got bike racks again. I feel like they're still open-ended that we need to discuss those kind of things, but I think that's probably it's a lot of information for tonight.
Sure.
I think I just selected.
Overall general support for moving
Yeah,
ahead with that. And
good.
that when we discuss it again, we can talk more specifically
Yes.
about where and how.
That sounds good. Steve, are you able to hear us? Can you?
Yes, yes, well, whatever you did made it work. You turned it upside down. Started.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm very impressed you stuck with us.
Yeah, well, I was hoping there'd be something exciting to listen to, like bike racks, so. All good. Don't know why my video doesn't work, but I'll take the sound any day.
Have bike racks at the Oak Hill Plaza.
Yeah, a few places, yeah.
Well, so the new residential and the bank, that section in the back there, you must have had to for planning board, when you went through the planning board?
Yes, yeah, we put them outside those buildings, and we have a bunch more in order for a couple other places. And we put them at all the apartment complexes.
So you have them on the other ones along Gorham Road, like?
Yes,
you know.
yeah, except the elderly one. The bike racks for the 3-wheel bikes.
Might
Nice.
be elderly.
Like,
to ride bikes.
See, you're showing by example,
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
Leading by example, I like it. Okay,
Shall we move on?
yep.
Okay. Townwide transportation study capital improvement project.
Has been, is now part of our town budget, thanks to council. So that means we have a lot of work to do now.
But that was a big first hurdle.
That is,
Personal
is.
thanks to all the
Yes.
counselors for seeing that through. That's a huge, it will be a huge advantage here. Once we get over all the work.
Well, so I guess I was just gonna start with my notes here. We're actually, I think we already talked about is that we're hearing more and more residents voicing concerns at public meetings about the need for the connectivity piece. So really it's that safe connectivity, like you had mentioned, and the lack of infrastructure in between to try to connect those dots. So really, I guess I would love to brainstorm with this group on, to your point, our next step essentially is coming up with a scope of work. So we're gonna have to put out requests for proposals to engineering firms, and saying, what does this look like? What do we want this to be? I am a little fearful of past planning studies being too planner focused instead of more implementable. Like, I want action items, I really do, out of this. I think that's been sort of the struggle. Obviously, planning, I shouldn't poo-poo the whole idea. Planning studies help a lot kind of focus or direct us to the point of, if council's endorsing, like, it's more of the big picture, the 30,000 view, which then can help, say, planning board as they're coming through with development, to know there's some direction, there's some, like to your point, you had mentioned in the Route 1 corridor study and talking about access management as an issue, and that identifies certain curb cuts and different things like that, or gaps in sidewalk. It's a tool, high level tool. And so that's what I tried to get that one to be more focused on, give me more specific, something that's really tangible for the planning board to say, oh, we like sidewalks. No, we like to fill these gaps in the sidewalk, right? So getting a little more fine grained, I would hope, but I'm the town engineer and that's what I do, is more fine grained stuff. So unfortunately, I don't have a planning director sitting here saying, no, we still gotta think high level, Angela, because that's what they usually pull me back to. But without them here, I can get more
Yeah.
to.
I feel like the comprehensive plan
Yeah,
did a good job on the high level.
that's true. I
And
like that.
But
Okay.
like, when I read it, I was like, yeah, that sounds great.
How do we do it?
Yeah, what's step
Right,
one?
now
Where do we
it's the
start?
how, right?
Yeah, and I feel like that's what this needs to be more, is like, we have our comp plan, like you said, we have our feedback from, we know this is a problem. What's the buildable plan over the next 10, 20 years, however long it's supposed to be, that gets us there, and where do we start? Like,
Yeah.
do we pick a part of the community, like we were talking about Eastern Trail being like where we want to route people, like
Mhm.
where do we pick and say, start here, build around it, and like give us what that potential plan could be.
Mhm.
I thought the Route 1 corridor study
Mhm.
that was done.
Yeah.
I tend to think that's like what you were talking about. For instance, they had, that was the one where they had rearranging the buildings and everything. Was it?
That's the
Oh,
comp
was
plan.
that the comp plan?
Yeah, comp
That's the
plan.
comp plan.
Yeah.
Okay, but didn't he have all these access roads and
So that was
like?
actually, yeah, that was one of the tasks I kind of added on, was really about shared access. Is there another way to have multiple, we're looking at maybe Dunstan area, where you have multiple lots that were single residential, which now are zoned for commercial. So they're non-conforming uses, but how do you don't want, everyone needs access. You can't not give someone access. So it's really about, you can't have like a driveway every 50 feet or something. Is there a way to pull them in the back and have like you said, a feeder road, kind of bringing those in, right? Those lots, which is only going to make it easier for a business to survive in that matter. Because if you can't get in and out of a business, then no one's going
Well,
there.
that's an economic problem right now. in Route 1,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, yes.
But I guess my point is, like on the Route 1 study,
Mhm.
what's the first thing that can be done on that?
I would say the low hanging fruit is the access management pieces. We talked about different curb cuts getting closed up and sidewalk gaps.
And we have used
Getting
that
filled in.
study in that way, right? The town has,
Mhm.
it informs what the Downs is doing at Oak Hill. So
Yes.
So that, by all accounts, in my opinion, that plan worked in that it was done. It was available, and when the opportunity arose for partnering or whatever whatever method, but for these improvements to be at the table, we had something that we could point to and say, this is actually the type of improvements that we want to have done at this intersection, and here's why, here's the whole study on why. I think you're right, that the comp plan was very, done very well and very good at sort of high level visioning. And a transportation study for this community would be well served to have like pretty specific outcomes that we could continue to point to as opportunities come up. And if opportunities don't come up, then we have to say like, shoot, we have these top 3 projects that were identified in our transportation study that we haven't been able to partner with anyone with, or can't get state funding or whatever it is, but if the problem's getting worse and we documented this however long ago, and now we need to make it a priority at the local level.
It also helps us, sorry to interrupt, to sometimes leverage state and federal funds. If I have a study, I know when we talk about doing Spurwink Road, like part of the application when we were looking for funds at different places was, it's in a plan that says it was from our 2006 transportation plan, but I was able to at least choose that and saying, this is an important, and it actually talked about bike and ped on Spurwink Corridor back in 2006.
Yeah.
And we still haven't really made that progress, right? So when we go looking for funds, it's good to also be able to point back that this is important to the town, it's in writing, and it was endorsed by council,
Right.
and there was a public process to get there.
I think at the same time, saying that there are 3 or 4 overarching principles. One, continuous sidewalks. How do we make that true? How do we reduce the number of curb cuts? And what is the, typical approach to that long-term as far as planning? And whatever, but I think having 3 or 4 overarching principles that say, okay, everything we look at is going to reflect this.
Yeah.
Makes
That's
it
good.
easier for planning board, makes it easier for zoning, makes it easier for a whole lot of people if it's clear.
That's a good point. I like the idea. It's sort of kind of structured like the comp plan, right? We talk about, there's what is the 9 guiding principle or whatever it is.
Right.
I should know them.
Right, but I think having a
But that's,
measure overall.
I like that
puts
idea.
a-
For this group to really kind of come up with those big overarching principles. I like that. To try to help, to your point, with a new consultant coming in and saying, what's the priority for this town?
I think there's a vision in the comp
Vision.
plan specifically on transportation.
Yep.
It's vision 5, and then there's tons of recommendations on what can be done. So it might be a good exercise to get this committee to help prioritize those, to say, if we were to kind of engage with them, say, which of these are the most important, why are they most important? And help use that to help shape the scope a little bit, to say, we really want you to make sure you're delivering and focusing on this particular recommendation.
And it's too bad, Alan Paul is usually here from Long Range. And he has actually talked about this twice as just kind of planting the seed and saying, we're gonna have homework for this committee and providing, here's gonna be the list, which is exactly what you're referring to. And this is the perfect opportunity as part of that study too.
And it might not even be fully complete, because I'm just scanning it, like
Yeah.
some of this conversation today, I think there's probably a lot more that this group might want to
Right.
recommend that's maybe missing too. Because some of these are very tactical and they're referring to the Route 1 study. But some are also still very broad that maybe need some more specificity.
And I know the last long range planning committee, they were talking about adding to the next agenda. Because they know they have to kind of wrap up these comp plan, the implementation piece. And that's where they're trying to split off to say, we're gonna have these items go to transportation, and these go to the sustainability committee, and these go to
Yeah, that
Well,
was,
you're
I know, I'm
actually,
right.
like, looking right at you, I totally forgot. That was the last meeting they were talking about, maybe not this next one, talking about stormwater ordinance,
Right,
but
the
then,
stormwater was
but
one.
having, I know it was very much a big focus to
Right.
keep going with the comp plan to wrap
Right,
up.
because we've done, what, 2 or 3 rounds now of trying to
I apologize.
hone it
Sorry
down.
about
Oh, but yeah, it's continuing to refine that, and it's not as simple as it might appear. Because what we did, in terms of process, is everybody took the list and set their own priorities. And then we mashed it together to see, which had the highest totals.
Interesting.
And then did another round with whatever shook up to the top, the top 10, and then again, and then went through the top 5. So we've been sifting as far as priorities. Now, the way some of the piece parts of that were phrased, as John is referring to, were a little nebulous. You really had to dig into the comp plan to say, what does this mean? Because it wasn't always very clear. But obviously, the marsh was, important and stormwater and clean water and so on. But you had to had to get a little bit into the weeds to figure out some of those.
But I'm sure too, the committee, and as you went through the comp plan, was trying to keep it at a higher level so that committees like this could get into the weedy, like to your point, John, maybe keeping it not as specific, right?
Yeah. We weren't dealing with all the stuff that long range planning sent out to the various committees. We were only dealing with long range planning.
Oh, yeah.
Because we didn't deal with all the other stuff.
Oh,
We
okay,
just-
so,
The stuff
oh,
that we
okay.
had directed for ourselves was what
Yep.
we were doing.
Oh, okay,
so each other committee has, this is the homework piece.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
okay.
So it was just long range planning, not.
Yeah, so we
Everything
should
else.
probably list third out.
So, yeah, we can look at that vision number 5 then, or is that what the committee, the long range planning committee then has a list specifically for transportation?
Yes,
Okay, so we just haven't seen that yet.
yes. And I'm surprised that you haven't, although this. Because there was a whole, there was a whole long document that was done that separated them out, that assigned various, and it wasn't just, you got Vision 5, you got Vision
Okay.
5A and E,
Oh,
and maybe 6, and yeah, so I mean, it was going through, but yeah, there was
Okay.
one for transportation.
Okay,
specifically.
that sounds good.
A couple years ago, I worked on a very large, very complex master planning study with an international consultant and all the people at the table. And it took 2 years to finish, and then it was finally finished, and then we had the opportunity in very small pieces, after that, to ask for funding to help address some of the things that this master plan. So like, okay, so we got our final document, and then the question was like, how do we do it? What do we do?
Now
first?
what?
And we flipped back to the final version of this document and just found it like, I mean, it wasn't a surprise. Many people involved were like not super happy with how it evolved over time, and then therefore what the final product was. But it was very difficult to go back to that, and with money, like if we have $100,000, what should we do first? And that sort of specificity really wasn't there, which for something of that scale,
And
big drop.
I think at the council level, we're gonna have a workshop on July 20th, and it's focused on the library. But the real focus is on how do we do better long-term capital planning?
Mm.
And I feel like this study really should help inform at least our infrastructure priorities, because we have some pretty big
For sure.
capital projects coming down the pipeline that,
This is the kind of thing that I don't know what type of schedule we're looking at here, but like, I feel like this committee and the planning board and thereby probably the council needed this thing like 5
Yeah.
years ago.
Mhm.
Actually 5 years ago. We've been really lucky. We we've sort of skated by, right? Like we had a big player at the table that has effectively done a huge amount of this work for us.
The implementation work.
Well, even that they had to study everything.
Well, that's
in order
right,
to
that's
get
true.
to the implementation. No, most main communities do not have that
That's true.
player at the table. And so before too much more time goes by, you know, those traffic counts are still valid, that all those, the network analyses that happened should still be valid. There's probably like a 3 or 5 year window on some of those, I think. But they also had, you know, the Downs study and the Downs traffic movement permit had a range, like a radius, and it doesn't line up with Scarborough's town borders. So there's other parts of town that were not looked at, that weren't studied, and, you know, rightfully so. And then there's other parts that maybe did fall within that study or on the fringe of that study, but that are going to be, you know, if we have big capital projects or any kind of projects come in on a different part of town, well, they're going to impact, you know, other I'm thinking of intersections just as like
Do they,
an example.
as part of the studies, do they typically do any sort of like scenario planning? Like if we were to say, like, what if a giant company like an Amazon wanted to come to Scarborough, like how would that impact our traffic and infrastructure, and where would our weaknesses and opportunities be? Like, what if XYZ scenario
Yeah.
happened? Because I think it's like not just where we are today, but
So I think of this a lot on the planning board, actually, when we continue to approve, you know, one project at a time that adds 9 a.m. trips through Oak Hill, or 24 Saturday morning trips through Payne at Tigers Parkway, or whatever, you know? No one on the planning board or in town anywhere, or even any development team is tallying those up. So we're piling on, right? And we don't, like, it's not infinite. So at some point, each intersection, each traffic signal that we have hits a capacity. And so a study like this, from my standpoint anyway, is so critical for us to understand what does that threshold look like? When do we get there? And to answer your question, you're sort of, you know, you're hypothesizing about big players coming to the table. We don't actually, you know, once this is finished, it won't matter who comes to the table or how big, or, you know, it's 10 medium-sized developments or whatever it is, because we can say, hey, Haggis at Payne Road has capacity for 250 more trips before it is a failing intersection. And so we can either reduce trips or we can expand the intersection, and there's, you know, some other minor options. But if we don't know, you know what I mean? Like, if we don't
Where
know
weaknesses
what
are.
that
Yeah,
feeling is,
right, yeah.
we're making it worse.
So the question for you, Jen, because there's different levels for a failing internet. So you're talking about level of service. So really, essentially, we can start looking at all our intersections at a level of service. But there's a different,
For sure.
there is an F level of service can range to a really bad F
Yes.
to just meeting an F,
And
right?
these-
So,
and these are industry technical
Right.
terms.
yes,
There's also lay people terms about when
Okay.
intersections fail.
Yeah.
That's what your survey is
that's what
saying.
you're
Yeah.
heading for, yeah.
So-
well, and I
We don't necessarily need to wait till it's like
Yeah.
mission critical, technical, textbook F at an
Okay.
intersection. That's my sense on it.
Okay,
But, you know, it can work both ways, where if we have a survey where people are like, I am waiting too long at the Oak Hill, like, this traffic is horrible, I can't get around town. Anyone with access to this study could, you know, say in an educated way, that's because we're at capacity. Or, you know, we have X amount more growth that we could see through this intersection. Like, or it's actually not that bad, the delay right now, like, you know, the delay
45 years.
could go up.
Yeah.
Could go up if we don't, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, trajectory is this way. unless we offload some of this.
Yeah.
Some of this demand. So that is one very small piece, again, of like what I understand the transportation study like this could provide to the town. And it's pretty technical, and I assure you, you have never seen like appendix like you will see for that kind of information. There's other pieces like we talked about before, you know, the importance of connectivity. So a consultant could come in and help the town do just this. Like they could analyze what roads we have that are lower volume. They would take into account the size of the shoulders that are out there, combine the two, and say like, actually, you've got this pretty good like secondary road. If we did X, Y, or Z to it, it would be, you know, those kind of things. So I think, you know, it's always interesting to me when, it was very interesting to me when the infrastructure pieces sort of bubbled to the top in terms of public input on this survey. And because I think that actually all, but I'm completely biased also, but I think that like all these other pieces, you know, people who are, you know, concerned with sustainability, well, transportation is, you know, maybe a number two, but it's like a number two to everything.
Yeah.
And when it's not working well for any of those individual things, then you like your whole network is a mess. Or it's just really, it becomes a big hurdle for the community, and it's not easy to fix.
Yeah. And I think that's the huge sentiment right now. Like when you, like the biggest concern I hear about growth is the first thing out of people's mouth is usually traffic.
Mhm.
And then it's quality of life, which
Yeah.
they associate a little bit with spending more time in their car or having difficulty finding a parking spot. Like it's all related to like getting around and access to things. That seems to be like the big concern when people are saying, I'm not supportive of growth or I'm concerned about growth. And so to me, that's kind of a key thing for them to help us solve is like, as we continue to grow, because we will continue to grow, what is the right transportation absorption plan that allows us to maintain the quality of life, which again, might not necessarily be an F official rating. It might just be like, how do we at least maintain what we have as best we can, and where are our biggest vulnerabilities that we need to really focus on to make sure that we know where those weaknesses or opportunities are, to make sure that we have those top of mind as we're, you know,
Yeah.
doing planning and prioritizing.
And not make them worse
Yeah,
through decision making that we could be better informed on.
yeah, exactly.
So I think.
Yeah, it was hooting. It was like,
But which goes back to the biking and the multimodal. How do we work with the community to raise people's awareness that, gee, maybe, you know, walking here or riding your bike here could be, you know, easier, more pleasant. One of the pieces of this traffic is we need to look at ourselves and how we're
Yeah.
contributing to it.
and how much of this, because I know too, when we talk about traffic and growth, like so much, like there's so many things today that happen where people are coming through Scarborough, either from the south or the north. And I know that's harder for us to control to a degree, but like, what are some solutions there that, again, we may need to advocate and propose to the state or somebody else to say, like, it's not a Scarborough solution, but if you guys, you know, did something over here on the state side, that's gonna route some of those Route 1.
All those connected
Well,
cars.
I
Yeah.
think there's a few things on the periphery that actually John Clucci brought up at our joint meeting about sustainability and conservation. It was like, what if, so when people were talking about wanting to be able to bike through Oak Hill and wanting to be able to bike up Route 1, he's like, maybe we need to start thinking extreme and let's propose that we get rid of the center and we make a center turn lane into just a northbound south line, 3-lane, and you widen the bike lanes, right? But it's that type of thing where then people don't want to drive down Route 1. It's like you have to make it
That's true.
painful. And I know he was doing it just like, I'm gonna throw this out there just to get a reaction. but those are the kind of things we need to start making a reaction to, and.
Because we're gonna end up in one of two places. Right? We're gonna end up in a place where we have created growth. I don't know, I feel like we've created more traffic, if that's what people are uncomfortable with. We've created more traffic through different types of decision making, such that we've choked ourselves down, right? It is so difficult to get around. I am not going to Hanford on Saturday because no way is that, I'm just not doing that. Or we could, we can plan a little bit better. And so the first step to that end, in my opinion, is a study like this, because otherwise you really have to have something, a roadmap, something to point to. But I also think, and it sort of sounds like, we're hearing some of these growing pains kind of like across the board. It's growing pains, right? Like a single driveway per lot for 3 properties at Dunstan Corner that used to be houses. That was sufficient one day. That was fine. It wasn't dangerous. It got people by. It was probably a great, small center to live in and live at. And that's not the case anymore. And so, we're not the first people to grow like this. And there are other, there are ways to do it. And it probably involves some mode shift. So that means less trips in cars because you can't have growth of people and the same number of car trips and not have a problem on your roads, because roads don't expand at the same rate that we're building. Yeah, I think we have good things in place in order to point to. So our comp plan, surveys, general feedback, things like that will be super helpful, I think, to this end. But I think the big hurdle, at least I feel that's the big hurdle will be to make sure we're asking for the right thing.
Right, yeah.
Which is
And I guess one other thing, when you're talking about from state level zooming out to, I know Route 1 traffic, I know we were just talking about, but from the south, there was a proposal for an exchange exit at Flag Pond Road. So getting the traffic on the highway really it was about, do we try to get people off Route 1 and get them on the highway? And that's what Saco was trying, and Scarborough we're looking at, and we actually put something into MTA to do Flag Pond Road. On the north end, part of the Route 1 corridor study, we talked about you're coming off a highway and you're on Route 1 in Scarborough, right? There's no transition. So do you start looking at how South Portland's comes, and there is a stop, you're stopping at Main Street, Route 1, but it makes it less convenient from flying off a highway at 70 miles an hour, right?
Have you ever biked through there? Southbound on Route 1 past the end of the connector?
No.
I would consider myself a confident cyclist, and that makes me want to be my hands. It is horrifying.
And then the other big one that, again, it's all about the turnpike, is the east-west connection.
Yeah.
Right? So that's going to get hopefully a lot of people doing the west commute. So it's really the commuting traffic. There are some pieces that really at either all the ends, I guess, not much you can do on the ocean end, but to look at those major arterials, and maybe we need to rethink how they're coming in and out of Scarborough, right? To make it less convenient to go 70 miles an hour when you enter Scarborough.
We have
Right.
we have good examples of this, I feel like, also not that far away. Like Route 1 runs through Freeport, and that feels very, very different than Scarborough, and the volumes are different, but
Yeah.
it can, it can be done, I think. Falmouth, there's other places, so I think certainly DOT has to be a partner to that conversation as well. My experience with DOT, they would probably not be in favor of like the let's make it uncomfortable.
They were not a fan of that.
Avenue.
You are correct when we went through, because they were what part of the funding for our study and we're
How
not
to
a
remove as
huge
many
fan.
cars as fast as possible.
And we
Yeah,
actually
maybe roads over
also
it.
talked about adding trees to that. So you
Yeah.
start having a tree canopy, they were not. So you start thinking you need to slow down because I'm entering someplace different,
Right.
right? Those type of things.
But also, they.
But they're friendlier now,
They've
DOT.
shown signs
They're
of
starting to
like,
shift, yes.
having well thought out documents that we
Yeah.
can take to the table with them.
Let me just say something, okay?
Yeah.
This is all good conversation, but I'll just point out a couple of things. that, Maybe about 20 years ago, there was just rumors of a connection between the Downs at the time, okay, over to Route 114. And I think before you were here.
Okay.
But it was just like, it maybe, emerged out of a conversation like a group like this. Well, all hell broke loose because, well, we're not gonna do that. I mean, we can't have that, you know? This goes back to the comp plan. The one thing I remember about the comp plan was all the dead end streets.
The earlier.
All right? I mean, the town is just riddled with dead end streets. And, so anyways, that was one thing I remember, and, I mean, there was an effort to squelch that whole rumor because it was just crazy havoc. Then the more recent one, and you guys on the town council are gonna have to deal with this if it comes up, is Oak Hill, with the plans for Oak Hill, because again, maybe about 15, 20 years ago, there were talks about an Easton Road branching off Black Point and going up by where Starbucks is now,
Yeah.
in that area there, and then the other one going over to Commercial Drive
Whoa.
to kind of reduce the traffic on Route 1.
Get a lot of traffic. through
Okay.
this.
Oh, you mean Commerce?
Yeah, Commerce Drive,
And.
and going up right by the condos and then coming out. And I'll tell you, again, all hell broke loose because, and the council just caved on the whole thing. And that came out of like transportation committee meeting, right? Committee. And it had all the experts, transportation experts that were available. And, theory
Yeah,
wise,
so
I
a
mean,
bypass
you're talking
is
about
still
a big, but
part of the
once
conversation.
the rubber meets the road, that's when all of a sudden everything's gonna come to a crash.
Yeah,
You know?
I can't speak to that, how the development of those ideas arrived, but I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago that kind of talked about this a little bit and talked about how what's the difference? She uses terminology. She said, what's the difference between a neighborhood and a project? And so like if you're thinking like a clean slate, down.
Okay. Hopefully this will be over soon.
Feel like
Hear
a
you, Steve.
neighborhood and not like just a project that somebody designed. And the answer was, well, you ask people what they want to have there. And so I think, again, robust public input cannot be overlooked. Like a job well done would be like being able to put concepts like that forward that don't catch anybody by surprise because they've been sort of up from the bottom, grassroots, everyone, and there's never going to be like full consensus, but where this committee, the town in general feels confident saying like, hey, we all decide, this is what we all decided on. And here's the whole history of like the input process that got there. And so I see that being relevant to this transportation study in ways like, again, elaborating on the comp plan, but providing structure on what we want this study to include by saying, like you were talking about, these are our priorities. If our priority as a community overall was to pump as many cars as possible on Route 1 from south to north and vice
Oh, we're
versa.
succeeding.
Well, that looks very different than a priority that's like, we don't want to impact a single more square foot of wetland, period, full stop. We will do whatever, and pick any other sort of priority. So, I think when you can arrive at those, and again, like our comp plan's a great start, when you can arrive at some of those priorities, like.
I think bashing together the comp plan and the survey
Yeah,
is really where you begin to find the
And-
intersection.
agreed. And continuing to build on that with any of these other like smaller, just sideline tallies of, comments at council meetings or
Yeah.
these public
Well, I think-
forums.
I think what I appreciate what Todd's doing with the Parks and Recs study, which I don't know, like, to me, this would be a requirement in here, like, what is the public engagement process to make sure
Yeah.
the public feels like they're brought along?
Mhm.
I do feel like there may be a little bit of survey fatigue within the community, but I think that's a really good way to get feedback, but what are some of the creative ways they're engaging the public in an input process that's like making sure that they're part of, helping to shape that a little bit, because to me,
Own a little bit.
yeah,
of it,
if they have a little bit of ownership in it, then they're more willing to support.
So you put on one of those
Recommendations.
digital signs at the intersection and says, so what is your idea about this intersection?
Yeah. Can you
Email
imagine?
to.
Does
it bring you joy?
Just some like flashing street signs as they're stuck on Route 1, like.
Yeah,
not happy.
Now, I can get through it.
Well, can you imagine what a public forum would look like if we said, we're like, we're gonna have a townwide conversation about traffic.
Well, that's what the council corner.
Well, I think
That's
I
where we
think
should,
that would be an
right?
interesting, that would be an interesting thing, because again, we're trying to do it on topics that are
Yeah.
gonna draw people,
Yeah.
and I think this one will
That's the
draw
way to do
people.
it.
Yeah.
This thing I mentioned before about Oak Hill.
Yeah.
This came out of it. This transportation committee is not the only iteration of this
Right,
committee.
yep.
Because I was on one 25 years ago, okay? And this whole thing with Oak Hill came out of a transportation committee meeting. And there were citizens on the committee. Plus there were guys like, it's a traffic. committee.
Oh,
Bill
Bill
Bragg.
Bragg.
Yeah, he was on it, and there was a whole bunch of people on it.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee you, I bet you, if you went out and asked the average person in Scarborough, do you know what might be happening at Oak Hill, they have no idea, they have no clue, okay? And I'd be surprised if it ever gets, I mean, I hope it does, because it's a traffic hazard up there, it's a mess. But it's one thing to talk about this stuff, but then you gotta get it explained to, people understand it. And that's the challenge.
Because we see a lot of people coming through, trying to miss that intersection.
Yes.
Whiz through the
Oh,
neighborhood.
yeah. But it was before Eastern Village was even thought about, because it was to go along Eastern Trail and then go up right by Scarborough Terrace
Mhm, mhm.
onto Commerce
I
Drive.
mean, I remember seeing some of that stuff for some reason, but, yeah.
So, but it raised the habit. And
I mean, we've talked about it too, even Ward Street and connecting back to the neighborhood behind the old police station. Just like you said, trying to find other outlets to a light. Here's another way out to the light. And I'm sure that would not go over big with that neighborhood.
Westwood would-
But at some point, like you said, you have to have the public forum for all of Scarborough saying, what's the greater good? And then it lands on council at that point. So there's all you can do is provide the data and the information and
Yep,
really,
yep.
we're getting to a point where, we're at a point where safety is a huge concern at some of these intersections.
Yeah,
Oak Hill being a huge high crash location.
that might be the difference now, because it is so dangerous now. I
Yeah.
mean, you have cars taking
Yeah.
lefts where they should only be taking rights, and
Yes.
Right.
I mean, every business at that intersection except Walgreens is a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to go get some air in the tire
Mhm,
of one of my cars, so I went to the Citgo station,
mhm.
and then I actually had to drive down.
Yeah.
Then I circled into McDonald's to come back to head back down the Blackburn Road. And it's just a mess.
Yeah,
But I've
well,
seen,
that's a
It's gonna get
project
more
that's gonna
fun
get
in the
addressed,
next-
right, in the Downs TMP.
That's, yeah.
and I had to dodge all these bicycles. Friday.
And all these tax avoiders, because they're not paying highway tax. Really?
But to your point, you're doing, like, the Downs, part of their TMP.
That's why we need
that
U-turns.
DOT is requiring them to put those islands that
That's why I say it's
you're,
only gonna get more fun.
you're essentially acting like there's an island there because you can't turn left. So
Yeah.
putting the island is gonna eliminate the others that are doing really dangerous maneuvers.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing we'll,
Like, do we,
Yeah.
do we want to try to meet more frequently if we've got all this on the plate? I know, I'm sorry, I know. It just
No,
Feels like there's a lot.
there is a lot. I think, yeah, I mean, with the transportation study, like, we really need to talk about timing and just the ideas that have come out of tonight. I just feel like maybe we didn't budget enough money. Because this seems like 5 traffic studies we're talking about, the scope, but, so it would be important
what
for.
is the budget?
Isn't that 100?
I think it's 100 or 150. But it would be good then to fine tune with this group, at least that scope, so we can start moving the process, because an RFP is gonna take some
Yeah.
time to develop and get back to, get it out on the street and then bids in and selection, you know what I mean? That's all time consuming, so
Yeah.
the sooner we get that scope, I would say should be probably a priority for this committee to try to get that moving.
Was there an expectation from council when that was passed on when a study would be returned, or like a time frame or something like
I
that?
would say, given the feedback from the community on this, like, it should be a #1 priority. Yeah,
But
get
not, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, but not.
Yesterday.
We need
yeah,
it in-
yeah. Like you said, we needed it 5 years ago,
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
So you can understand why I'm so excited.
Yeah.
That this is, it's here now. A lot of communities don't invest in this type of study. Or if they do, it's really because, you know, they're in the dire straits and then they kind of missed the boat. And, so I do think it's great.
So the 4th Tuesday of July is July 26th.
Works for me.
Is that-
I'm free, but I don't think it matters.
Oh, come on.
Oh, I'll be here, but I don't think it decides whether the meeting is.
No, that's fine.
I can do
Okay. Greg, what do you-
Yeah.
It does. Steve, could you hear us? What do you think of July 26th? Are you still there?
it. Yeah, hold on one moment. I think we'll be fine.
So it'll be.
Yep.
strictly-
I
Okay,
had
great.
the previously scheduled transportation meeting, July 26th.
July 26th. Yeah, it's our normal 4th
Yeah,
Tuesday.
that's good.
So I guess it's up to Jen, but I'm gonna propose that we just put on the scope of the transportation day, and I don't know if,
And
I'm not a good facilitator, and I apologize to this group, that's not my forte, and so it is helpful to have, I don't know, I might reach out to maybe our transportation engineer, like maybe John Adams or somebody, although he gets sidetracked pretty easily too.
And let me check also going back to long-range planning.
Yeah,
and pull
okay.
out what was assigned to this committee.
And maybe that's actually, you just made me think that Karen Martin might also be a resource for
Yeah.
us. Not that she knows a lot about transportation, but facilitating to
Okay.
get us to a point to say, oh, this is your overarching principle that I think you're
And she can pull
articulating.
out too.
And the
that
comp
particular-
plan pieces that she'd be more familiar with. So let me check with her as well. I just feel like unfortunately, it's not my forte is to kind of keep that, the
It's-
facilitating piece
Yeah.
together to
it's
keep
hard when
us
you're trying to,
focused.
like, do all the
And I'm also
things.
contributing, yeah, I'm like, no, I want to put my 2 cents in too.
Another thing that might be helpful is, and maybe this is something that you and I'd be happy to help out, between now and then, Angela, but, and committee, tell me if you think this would also be helpful, but maybe looking at framework for some other, like some examples of
Yes,
studies.
that
So
would-
like, I know what can be in these studies, but that's my job. So if I didn't know that, then
Yeah.
I would want to know like, what's even, like, what's the table of
good point.
contents look like for
Yeah, that'd be
a
helpful.
transportation study?
Okay.
Or, you know, a summary, like an executive summary or something like that. What should we be touching on? And,
Mhm.
you know, depending on where those are from, you know, maybe if somebody has a heavy rail component and we're like, okay, well, that's not like
Right.
super relevant here,
Gotcha.
but,
I also think this would be an excellent, at some point, to get in front of the town council as like a workshop.
Oh,
Once
okay.
it's a little bit more.
Yeah, once we have a scope kind of drafted,
Because I
maybe.
think they're gonna have
Okay,
a good perspective too on things for consideration, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure this team will think of a lot of good ideas, but what'll be interesting is, because like as we talk about growth, which is kind of the big topic right now, to me, again, like thinking of this as like part of the solution to that somehow and making sure that we're continuously paying attention to this aspect, I think will hopefully give the public more confidence and that we're trying to do the right things to absorb the growth appropriately.
that's kind of that's what I internalize. When I hear that people are uncomfortable with growth in Scarborough, what I often hear is like, I really hate the traffic. They don't want
Right,
more
yeah.
people here because they don't want more traffic.
Mhm.
Do you get that sense?
Yes, I
Okay.
get that sense, and I think it's more like, they feel like the schools, the traffic, like we don't have proper absorption plans
Yeah.
to be able to maintain the quality of life that they would like to retain. And again, I think that's possible, right? Like as we grow, and like to your point about traffic, there's only so much we can do that there will come a point where, yes, you will have to spend another 5 minutes. But if we can do things proactively to try and manage that, and this can help us from a traffic perspective and help us create that absorption plan so that as we grow, we know how fast we can grow and where we need to focus the efforts to accommodate that quality of life. I think this will be like a big tool for future councils to use to like keep on the path and make sure we're making informed decisions.
You know, when you hear people say quality of life, I think you have to consider where they're coming from.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You know, for instance, if the natives,
Mhm.
I mean, they want to go back to the one-room schoolhouse that's out there, Holmes Road, you know?
But I came from Northern Virginia, and so I'm very accustomed to what really bad is. And for me, it's more, I just don't want this to become that. And if we can do things to prevent that, that's really what I'm looking for, is
Yeah,
like,
but if people are, like, if they're moving into, say, the Downs or Eastern Village, they know what they're moving into.
yeah, that's
You
fair.
know? And I find it kind of fascinating, people who move into like where you live, maybe out,
North Scarborough?
yeah, North Scarborough or out on Beach Ridge Road or out Mitchell Hill or
Mhm.
Mitchell Road, out in that area there. And they're concerned about the quality of life. Well, they're hardly ever over in this
Well,
section.
no, it's funny, it's everywhere. Like when you look at the survey data and you look at the concerns on growth, it's pretty consistent by how long you've been here and where you live. Like the concern is across the board, across all different demographics. I think maybe what they care about specifically might be different, or to your point, their point of reference may be different, but there's still that pervasive concern, whether you're a new resident to Scarborough or you've been here your whole life, that there's this concern about growth and the concern about traffic.
Well, if you're moving, if you're looking to move into a community in Greater Portland, and this has been for a long time, Scarborough, even during the downturns, has always had growth.
Mhm.
And it's because of its geographic location. It's just an optimal place to be, okay? It's so convenient. So if people are looking for a place to move to, and they don't want growth, they shouldn't even be looking at Scarborough. There's plenty of other communities where there's very little growth. So, I mean, I get kind of irritated sometimes when people complain about this, because this town has had a, good growth management for quite a number of decades, I think. At least as far as I'm concerned. And, so, I mean, it is growing and we do have to control it. But
I think that's the key is like, we are gonna grow. We're not gonna stop growing because we're a great place for growth. But if we can come up with solutions that absorb that as much as possible so that as many people can maintain whatever quality of life that they look for, that they love to live in Scarborough, then I think that's what we want to try and do. That doesn't mean it's gonna solve everything and everybody's gonna be happy and there aren't people who want to leave at some point, because to your point, maybe they pick their own town and they should be living out in Buxton or somewhere else that's like definitely more what they're looking for. So I think that's, I think that's kind of the challenge before us with this transportation study is like, as we grow, how do we try, like, and I don't know what the right metrics are, but like, what are those community metrics that we would say this transportation study is ultimately delivering on key metrics that the community cares about, and making sure that we can design it in a way that it hopefully helps guide us a little bit.
Right, yeah,
That's where we get those 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Guiding
right.
Mhm.
where Jen and I live in Pleasant Hill, when they expanded the public sewer system, that area where we live doubled.
Yeah.
It just doubled almost overnight,
Mhm.
all right? And that's because people wanted to move there.
Yeah.
I mean, they wanted to be east of the turnpike.
Mhm.
The vast majority, there are still people who do want to live out on the western side, but that's fine. But most of the people want to live east of the turnpike
Mhm.
for all the amenities and the ease to get into Portland and things like that.
It'll be
Well-
interesting to see how like in a post-COVID or still not post-COVID, but like, what does that do to like the people who are wanting to come into town, like longer term, right? Like, are we gonna, like, I think everybody wants to go to Portland, right? I think that's the draw is like people want to live in
Well,
Portland.
I think we're all a little bit stuck in that mentality.
Mhm.
But I don't think it necessarily needs to be that way. Like, if you want to go hear the conversations that are happening in Portland, it's people talking about how difficult it is to do just that.
Mhm.
And, you see the result of this in things like the restaurant scene in Biddeford, highly desirable, cheaper, easier to park, easier to get to, quicker in and out now, right, yes.
Yeah.
That's why they gotta pass the.
But
that
every-
road.
Yeah, I know, right? That's true.
I just think the mentality that like we are a tunnel for people to, to go back and forth. There will always be an element of that because we are so proximate to Portland, like you were saying, but we should be open, I think, to the notion that may be a little bit different moving forward because of people just like you.
Yeah.
Who don't need to do that for their job. Commuting
Right.
now, needs something very different than it did a very short time ago.
Mhm.
And even before that, even before COVID, population numbers and traffic in general, at least in Portland, there were many more people in Portland in like the 60s than there are right now.
Yeah, the numbers were dropping. for
And
traffic.
so,
Yeah.
things change a little bit, that's all I'm gonna say. And so, I would love it if we had a document like this that maybe looked at Scarborough a little bit more, as a having an element of being a destination itself, not wholly that, but like, okay, yeah, some people might want to live here and work here. And then they don't have to go through here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The
anyway,
trouble is, our destination restaurants don't have a parking.
Yeah.
And Karen, to your point, Karen Martin just was telling you last week that our center of population is actually shifting west.
sure.
So it is some of the pieces that we put in place for, I think, coastline protection, different things, is shifting people away from the coast. And so you're finding the center population of Scarborough is changing. So to that point, we don't want the, to kind of destroy some of the character in other parts of town, right? So if Oak Hill is kind of broken, do we really just want to keep moving that down Gorham Road, right? Which obviously on the other end, North Scarborough is also broken right now, when just during commuting traffic, just the 20 minutes, right? But it's still, we just don't want that to grow. So we need to be thoughtful of the opportunities that we have and kind of,
I
guess
guess,
I'll-
the other big dilemma I think the town has is all the wetlands.
it's not a dilemma,
Well, I mean.
it's a
no, it's-
habitat.
Unless we want to have ferry services everywhere. But we
But that
can't,
was-
we can't build roads where, I mean,
But that's what the comp plan is saying, the marsh is our number one asset.
no, I
right?
understand. I'm just talking about in terms of transportation.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
is.
We're,
Yes.
we're limited as to our major arteries because of,
Yeah.
a lot of it is because of the wetlands.
That couldn't be built today, that are there. So like the Route 1 crossing would be very difficult to build today, but it's there.
Which may need to be raised.
Yes,
Probably will.
working on that, yes. Yep.
Good.
So I guess I have my marching orders. I don't know if,
You wanna do officers now,
it is 8.
or should we move that to meeting next?
Huh?
I feel really depressed because it's so negative. So
Give us a dose of reality,
I think I'll
Roger.
call down in the morning.
Do you want to just end it with public comment, then we can deal with other, because it is
Sure.
well be after 8.
Yeah, let's do that, can we do that first and our next,
Yes, unless you
Agenda.
want to make a proposal, it's up to you.
wait, unless what?
You said put this as first as the next agenda item? Oh, okay, the next agenda, okay, got it.
We have public comment?
I mean, I had some things to talk about, but I could save it for next month. If that's easier. I mean, there are things we've talked about a lot with like Payne Road not having any sidewalks and I guess as well. I know last month or 2 months ago now,
Mhm.
I think Jen brought it up, but someone mentioned that Higas is a state controlled road or something like that. So making any changes there is a huge effort, but I know running down it, like I mentioned earlier, is very scary, but I see lots for sale along it. So I just see more construction gonna be happening and like you were mentioning earlier, death by 1,000 paper cuts with just more and more driveways going in and out, more and more complexity there. That being ahead of that might be something worthwhile.
So another one of the Downs required TMP improvements is actually to connect where you probably have seen on Higas where they're gonna come out because they've clear cut that area. From there back to Cabela's
Right.
is required to have a sidewalk.
Yep.
So they'll have an off-road. It won't be on the road, it'll be the road, Higas with
Oh,
the paved
like
shoulder,
grass.
a ditch,
Oh, I see.
and then the sidewalk on the back
I was
side of the
looking at the
ditch.
plan today
Okay,
and I could not figure out what that meant.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
But
So-
that is later, but it, yeah.
yeah, all I saw was it was expected by 2026. And I had no idea where in the schedule it fell, but
Yeah,
yeah, like, so I love that idea. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's great because that will get me over to the Down safely and then a lot is available from there. But just as I went down, I guess the other week, I noticed a lot more, or I think it was 2 or 3 lots for sale and some construction already happening.
Mhm.
And it just seems the inevitable if that area is gonna be growing a lot with. I know my complex is adding 2 more buildings, so I think they'll be up to 320 units and the Downs has so much. Having that very busy road right there might be
Mhm.
something worth considering changing. That's all.
You know your state rep.
Right, no, I have to go to another meeting for that one.
Alright.
Thank you.
Ready to adjourn?
Yes, right.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks a lot, Angela, everyone. I will see you next time.